What's up, everybody? I'm Lori Lindsey, a former U.S. Women's National Team player, and I am pumped for our guest today for the You Can Play project discussion with U.S. defender Tierna Davidson. So, welcome. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. When we were talking off screen, I mean, we have definitely seen each other a number of times, but have never actually met and or chatted in person for a while. So, I'm pumped to discuss and get to know you a little bit more.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. So, 21 years old, played 2019 World Cup champion, 2017 NCAA champion. I mean, you've done more at 21 years old than a lot of people have done in their entire soccer careers. But what I'm most excited talking about is kind of life, both on the field but also off. So, one thing, openly gay athlete. Can you been out for a couple years now? Can you talk about that process and what that's been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have been very privileged to have had a very positive experience and process. I know many times people are not accepted by their families or their friends or whatever environment they might be in. But I think I was very lucky to have a very welcoming family, a very understanding and supportive family. And then also growing up in the Bay Area in California and then going to school there as well. It's a bubble of a bit more open or liberal thinking and beliefs. So I was lucky enough to decide to come out in college, and my teammates, my friends, staff, coaches, everyone was incredibly supportive. I can't say that I ever had a really negative experience. So I feel really appreciative for that, because it can make it very difficult to love yourself and to accept yourself if other people around you aren't. And so, soccer, women's soccer specifically, is a special sport, because I think it's very welcoming of the LGBTQ community. And so I'm lucky to have some great people and some great role models around me to help make the process a little bit easier.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I thank the lucky stars every day are having the women's soccer community for sure. Speaking to that about soccer, I mean, I can relate to having a positive home environment. My mom's a lesbian, so just the process of coming out, I feel very privileged as well. Um, but in terms of, do you feel like not only your family but soccer playing from a young age helped in terms of understanding your sexuality by the time you got to college?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I was always raised to be very confident, independent, self assured. And I think soccer specifically helped me with that. Because I think as an athlete, you have to be self confident and self assured, because there always are going to be people who might tell you you're not good enough, or you're not going to make it to the next level, or whatever it might be. And so you have to have your self confidence and your self belief that you're going to be able to do what you want to do. And so I think that translates over a little bit into um, coming out, in the sense that there are going to be people that don't love you for who you are, don't love that part of you, but ultimately it's more important that you are able to live your life authentically, and to live your truth. And so I think that growing up with soccer was really helpful in that sense. I also think that having soccer as a path to see role models was really important, because I think that women's soccer is a unique space, that there are a number and a growing number of athletes who serve as role models in the LGBTQ community. So I think that was very helpful, to make me feel welcome and comfortable.
So you're making my job so easy because you're just like leading me right into the next question. So this is amazing, because that's what I was going to ask you about role models, anybody that's inspired you. Because I think I read somewhere that you were only 13 when Megan, one of my best friends, Megan Rapinoe, came out, and I love telling this story about Megan in terms of right before the 2012 Olympics, she came out in Out magazine, and I have it was such a glaring change in the way that she was able to like live her authentic or express who she was wholeheartedly, and then goes and like destroys the Olympics in terms of like playing her best soccer. And it was such a good translation in terms of bringing your full self to the game. Any particular athletes that have really inspired you or given you kind of that proof of context that it is okay and you can feel comfortable with being an out athlete?
Yeah, I mean, well, I have to give a lot of credit to Megan, because she's probably one of the people in my life that I feel I have been able to watch live super authentically. I think that she lives with no regrets, and she lives incredibly honestly, and I think that's really inspiring. And given that I was able to watch that from a young age, was really important. I must say though, probably my biggest role model is not an athlete, but my aunt, because she is also gay, and she has had a partner my entire existence. And so growing up, I didn't really ever question whether a man or a woman, or had to be with a man or a woman. I think that in my mind, I was just raised of like, you get to choose who you want to choose, and you love who you love, and that's pretty much it. And I never was like, oh, that's kind of odd, or like, oh, that's weird, that's not normal. And so I think that just having that in the back of my head, not even having to have that conversation outright, but just having that constant expression of self in my family that I got to see very frequently, and that it was normal and it was accepted, I think was incredibly important for my acceptance later down the road.
And in regards to Megan and your aunt, has that, in the day of social media and a lot of eyes and in actuality, like a beautiful time to be able to use a platform for good, has it really had you think about how you use your platform in terms of social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have a very unique and special opportunity to access a lot of people in this world through social media. Thousands and thousands of people that I perhaps will never meet, but happen to, I guess, like me as a player, like me as a person, and follow my various social media accounts. And I feel that it's incredibly important that um, I use my platform for what I see fit. And one of those things is the support of the LGBTQ community, especially younger individuals that are part of our community, because it, as we said before, it can be really difficult when you're coming out in an environment that is not super accepting. And so I think social media has been able to be an avenue for um, young people coming out to access role models, to access support that they wouldn't have otherwise gotten in their own environment. So I think it's really special. It really warms my heart that sometimes I get messages from people saying that just my expression of myself, my relationship with my partner on social media has inspired them to live their authentic self, and to accept themselves and love themselves, which is really special. So I would love to keep using my platform to help people in their own lives.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because being a handful of years or a little bit more than that ahead of you in terms of my playing career with the national team, it was like I was living a very out life, but at the same time, social media was just starting to take over, and it was a little bit like, okay, how do I use this platform, right? If like huge companies or like big time magazines like Out Magazine weren't coming to me to be like, hey, like let's do a full
Hmm.
page spread about you being an out athlete.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious about different ways and different conversations that athletes are having in terms of for young players, but then also teammates. Have you had to have discussions about inclusivity amongst your teammates, both at the college level or at the pro level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, so that I've been lucky enough to not have to have a conversation of someone who is outwardly disapproving of someone in the LGBT community. I think the teammates that I've had at the college level, currently in Chicago on the national team, have all been incredibly supportive and accepting, which is fantastic to have around. But I think some of the conversations that I've had are about educating people about their privilege, if they are in a heterosexual relationship, or they are straight but they're single. It's interesting because they sometimes don't even understand the things that might go through my head if I'm walking down the street with my partner. I will have to think twice, perhaps, about what neighborhood I'm in before I hold her hand or before any sort of intimacy is shown. Unfortunately, there is still aggression and disapproval towards the LGBTQ community in a lot of places, and so you know I've had to have conversations with people about you know it, it's different because when you walk down the street with your boyfriend, you don't ever have to think about, oh, who's going to be sending me stares, or who's going to approach me and say some derogatory things if I, kiss my boyfriend, as opposed to me doing the same with my partner. You have to think a little bit more about that, and it is important that everybody kind of understands the thoughts that have to go through your head as you're in a relationship that not all people approve of inherently. And whilst it is not the the most major lack of privilege that you can find in this world, it is something that is hard to work through at some points. And you just kind of have to be cognizant of. And so I think educating people on that is important. And so I've done that when necessary. And I think my teammates have been incredibly receptive of it, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, I think the education point, and like we can we'll shift to this in a bit, but like in terms of politically, with Black Lives Matter and what's happening in our world today, I mean, the education component is so massive in terms of us who have privilege. In terms of those conversations, though, have they looked different between your college experience and the professional experience, or have you found them to be fairly similar?
I mean, I think that the people that I've had the conversations with have all been very receptive, very open, and wanting to learn. So it's never been um, a, unproductive conversation by any means. But I think there is a bit of a difference moving from college to pro, because I think in the pro leagues you just have a bit more experience of being around LGBTQ individuals. Obviously, you've lived life for a couple more years, but also I feel like the concentration gets a little bit higher as you move towards the pro league. Obviously, in college, everyone's often, still figuring things out, who they are, how they want to present themselves to the world, kind of what their views are. And so, not a lot, there's a lot less definition of self in college, as opposed to as you get to the pro leagues. And obviously, you know, you in pro, you have a range of 15 years of experience between perhaps some of the older players and some of the younger players, as opposed to college you're all within 4 years of each other. So the conversations do look a little bit different, though. I would say overall the general gist and the feelings and the outcomes are pretty similar.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say that's the thing is like when you get to pro, I mean, everyone's had vastly different experiences compared to college. I mean, everyone's experiences and their challenges are very different, but at the same time, you're relatively within the same age, so the you're in the same process of in what's going on with your life for the most
Yeah.
part.
Hmm.
In terms of keeping shifting gears a little bit, in terms of keeping LGBTQ athletes in the game, have you had any experience with like working with youth and or directly working with them in terms of providing some? Because both of us have acknowledged that we've had a lot of privilege in terms of our process of coming out, and that's not the
Hmm.
case, right, for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
especially in um, different communities of color, Black communities. So, have you had any experience working with youth and keeping younger LGBTQ athletes in the game, or is it something
I,
you're
I
interested in?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've formally done on a larger scale, but it's something that I'm very interested in doing. Just because I know that a lot of times people get pushed out of environments because they don't feel comfortable with themselves, and whether or not that environment is exacerbating that, or even if it's a supportive environment, but they have other stuff going on. I think it's really important that these young individuals get that support that they need, regardless of um, what community they're from, or where in the world they're from. Obviously, there's a little bit of a barrier currently because we can't interact with people in person right now. But I'm really excited for when this whole quarantine thing ends and we can start having larger groups again, because we've got a lot of great ideas on our team rolling through, not just with LGBTQ, but also with the Black Lives Matter, and getting youth that you know should have the opportunity to play sports, to play soccer in underserved communities, to get them into the sport, which is really important.
Yeah, and I love hearing that because I was thinking about this conversation with you. It reminds me how powerful women's sport is in terms of like the WNBA, right? Women's soccer. I mean, just women's sports in general. Because you and I are having this conversation in terms of um, our experiences coming out and some of the ease behind that for the most part, and again understanding our privilege within that. But I mean, when you look at the male sports, and then there's not a lot of male athletes that are out, right? In fact, there's still seems to be the number one factor is fear to come out in
Hmm.
terms of masculine oriented sports and the way that they're perceived. And I think it's women's sport has such can have such an even bigger impact than we currently are having, to have these discussions around race, sexuality, and going forward. So look forward to hearing kind of what's in the process for that, or what that looks like.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're really
we're really
excited.
excited. Yeah, for sure. In terms of, let's see, where do I want to go? One of the project you can play project is there are two components. Are kind of allyship and accountability, or respect and accountability, excuse me. And we seem to be able to have that conversation in terms of like pride and pride month and wearing pride flags on jerseys, and over time it's become a bit more comfortable. But how can you see that being applied to, again, topics of race and communities of people of color? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's hard because the people that are most supportive of Pride and of the LGBTQ community are like already involved. Um, because generally, when you're really confident about being out or confident about yourself, you go and you seek the publicity, the sport, whatever it might be, the community where that is most supported. And women's soccer is a big hub for that. Women's sports in general is a big hub. And so I think, as we spoke before, it's really important to access the communities and the individuals that don't see that every day. Either don't even know about the women's sports teams in their area, don't see them on TV, don't see them on social media. It's really important to put our faces and to put our personalities out there, and really get on the ground and interact with those communities so that we can show them, the different great, unique individuals we have, whether it be fantastic Black athletes in our sport, whether it be fantastic LGBTQ athletes in our sport. Because we all have an amazing quality about us, each and every one of us in our sport. And so I think it's really important that we can get into places that don't see us every day, don't see us on their phone, on their TV, in the newspaper, whatever it might be. And so they can start to see themselves in us as athletes, and they can start to get inspired and to get ideas about their life and where they want to go, and how they want to make a change in their own communities eventually down the line.
Yeah, that's why what we're seeing right now, the biggest civil rights uprising in history, and the amplifying of Black voices, and it's almost like you get this sense of. I remember speaking or listening to CJ Sapong for the LA Galaxy in an interview just recently, and he was like, "It's almost like it's such a relief to be able to have these conversations." And I think over time, because so many corporations have gotten behind the pride movement and the messaging of pride, but now we're starting to see different components and intersectionality in regards to what it looks like for to be a black and gay athlete, right? And we're seeing Taylor Smith
Mhm.
of OL Reign talk about that, and just these voices, and to hear everyone's their message, right, or their story and their experience. And I think when you talk about community, that's the most important, because that's what brings to life and the understanding to make this way more inclusive than
Mhm.
we think that we actually have been, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but in regards to that, sorry, so that wasn't actually a question, but so in terms of all of this, like, would you like to see like the LGBTQ community, LGBTQIA community in 10 years' time?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the community has grown immensely, and the acceptance of the community has grown immensely. The commercialization of it, that honestly, just the normalization of it has grown. Um, More companies than not are doing things for Pride Month. Whether it be Google changing their colors, or people having pride events. It has become really normal, and so I think that we, as a marginalized community, can now reach out and lift up, amplify other marginalized communities, because, as you said, there is an intersectionality, and there is overlap between, for example, our community and the Black community. And I think that now that we have basically climbed the ladder to get to the point where we have a platform, with big corporations. We have a platform that a lot of people can see, and it's very visible. Now it's our job to lift up communities that need that platform to spread their message, and to get more acceptance and more support. And so I think hopefully down the line, we can have a little bit more inter-community work, to help other marginalized communities that don't have the same amount of airtime, amount of voice that we do, to be able to spread their message, get their voices across, get their stories across, and hopefully gain support for them as well.
Yeah, for sure. And do you feel like you as an individual will become even more involved? How do you kind of see yourself too? I mean, it's hard to predict, right? But like in terms of being a pivotal individual in women's soccer, how do you kind of see that progressing and you becoming more involved around these conversations and with different corporations?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that I can continue to get more involved. I feel like I have a lot of opinions, a lot of ideas, if anybody is willing to hear them. So I also, of course, it depends, where I am 10 years down the line, what I'm doing. And obviously that largely is based on marketability, where I go with my career, and hopefully it continues to move in the upward trend so that I can, have a larger platform and have more influence. But I hope to be able to, you know, be a part of a group of athletes that want to make a long lasting change for people that don't feel accepted, or don't feel or that don't feel accepted and feel marginalized, wherever they're living. And so I hope to be very intimately involved in, whatever market I'm in 10 years, whether it still be Chicago, whether it be somewhere else. But really getting out and, um, educating educating young people, um, honestly, just putting faces in front of them that look like them, that have similar stories to them, so that they can see themselves in us, and hopefully, kind of learn that there's a place for them in this world, whether it be with women's soccer, whether it be, somewhere else. There is a place for them to grow, and for them to, really make a difference.
Yeah, I love hearing that, because I think what we're really seeing too, and this has been happening for years, but because of the platforms, we're starting to see athletes really wanting to bring their full selves to um, to their sport, right? It's not just about sticking to sport. We hear that dialogue sometimes, and because of that, we're seeing like driving a change that's happening. And so, thank you for that, and thank you for your willingness because it can be scary, and I think that's what it takes, or it is what it takes, and we're seeing that currently right now. That we're gonna all have to be uncomfortable and have the tough conversations. So. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. This has been amazing and insightful, and best wishes with the NWSL Challenge Cup coming up, and with a long career on and off the field. And yeah, just thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a great conversation.